everything is on hold since the last meeting. The last meeting, I believe, was a lot of the tribal elders who were there in Kabul, and they were there for a couple of days. But soon afterwards, when there were reports of militants being spotted here and there in Swat and other places, and there was a lot of public outcry and protest in Swat and Dir. I think, everybody is now back to their drawing boards and trying to figure out what to do next. So everything is on hold for the time being, and there's not been any overt meeting or meetings between the two sides since then. The problem is that, not many people actually know what has been agreed to, or, the understanding at least that has been reached at the top. The tribal leaders have been there to address, some concerns and issues. But in the larger context, the critical, issues pertaining to the ceasefire and the return and so-called integration of or reintegration of the TTP militants back into the tribes and in their own areas. That is something nobody actually knows, because those sort of discussions. This is my understanding. Probably took place between the top TTP leadership and our, government emissaries or military officers were part of the official delegation which went to Kabul and had discussions over there. Obviously, in the presence of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the Afghan Taliban acting interior minister. So, what happened, what was discussed, what was agreed upon, nobody knows this. And that's why, there's been so much confusion. How come, before there was a formal peace agreement or before anything was publicly announced, armed militants started coming back to Swat and other areas in Khyber and South Waziristan and other places. And because there is no clarity, there is so much concern. And because there is so much ambiguity regarding the terms, of the ceasefire, the TTP is taking advantage of this ambiguity. Yesterday, for instance, they carried out an attack and an army officer and 3 other, Jawan, they were killed. And the TTP issued a statement that this was a defensive, attack or a revenge attack. So they carry out attack here and then sporadically, despite there being a ceasefire and despite actually insisting that there is a ceasefire and it is still holding, they're carrying out attacks and they just label them as defensive or revenge attacks. So who is going to, clarify this or, figure out which one was the offensive attack and which was the defensive attack? So I think, and also the militants, they're coming back. They're armed. There is no public statement, at least from any of the government functionaries, from the government or from the ISPR or anybody else for that matter, to actually, clarify for us to understand, what happened in Kabul, the negotiations, the extent of the negotiations, and the terms of the agreement, if there was an agreement, or any understanding that has been reached, so that we know, what is happening and be able to understand what is happening. Well, that the problem is that TTP, in the past, had worked as rear guards for the TTA or the Tehreek-i-Taliban Afghanistan. When they were here in North Waziristan, Sirajuddin Haqqani or the Haqqani network, the West have been, accusing us of harboring the Haqqani network. And they've been talking about the Quetta Shura or the Miramshah Shura or the Peshawar Shura. So, they were there and the TTP protected them, not just only protected them, the TTP fought alongside the TTA in Afghanistan against the Americans, with men and with material, supplied them with suicide bombers. They offered so many sacrifices for the TTA in Afghanistan. So it's a payback time for the Afghan Taliban. The Afghan Taliban are in a difficult position because they cannot coerce them or the TTP into any sort of an agreement which is not acceptable to the TTP. All that they can do is persuade them, nudge them, ask Pakistan to show some, leniency or accommodate the TTP's demands, one way or the other. So this is what they do. It was like the classic example of you scratch my back and I scratch yours. So it is the TTP's, time to ask for favors in terms of protection for as long as they are there, and support also. Initially, the TTP thought and believed that the TTA would support them, back them up the same way they did when the TTA, needed support while they were operating from here. So it's a difficult situation for the Afghan Taliban. They need Pakistan for all sorts of support. They are landlocked. Much of the trade for Afghanistan flows from Pakistan or through Pakistan. They need Pakistan, but at the same time they cannot, do anything to, create problems for themselves. Many of the GTP people are still there in their ranks, performing police duties in many of the districts in Afghanistan for the Afghan Taliban. So it's a difficult situation for them. How long can they go on, accommodate? They can do whatever. Obviously, the TTA, is trying to rein them in. And it's on their request that there is the so-called ceasefire, and talks, not happening for the time being, but they may resume anytime. We don't know what shape, the events unfolding here in Pakistan. I'm sure, many people would be discussing the issues at the moment, the attacks, the calls, extortion calls that we are getting from Afghanistan, the re-emergence of armed TTP militants in some areas. These are all issues that I'm sure Pakistanis would want to discuss with the Afghan Taliban, at least, if not with the TTP. Sustainable, I don't know. If there is a dramatic escalation, I don't think it will be possible for the Pakistani authorities to continue to abide by the ceasefire, like the one incident yesterday in North Waziristan, where an army officer, a captain, was killed along with the other soldiers. So if there is any dramatic escalation, I'm sure there will be Pakistanis, or the establishment would be rethinking the whole strategy. They would want to go back to Kabul and speak to the Afghan Taliban. Like in the past, there will be a lot of blame game, the TTP blaming us for violating, and we'll be blaming them for violating. And eventually it would be for the TTA to figure out, who is right and who is wrong. But, sooner or later, I think, Pakistan needs to have a very, serious dialogue with the Afghan Taliban. This cannot, go on like this with so much ambiguity. And I think, Pakistani people also need to be, assured and told in clear terms what has been discussed in Kabul, what were the terms of, what was agreed upon, or, what understanding, if at all, there was reached between the two sides.